folks. As more people come in to the session, I'll add them in. But good evening. I'm Shanika Ward, current chapter president for Atlanta. And for those that might not be familiar with it, with BDPA, we're a nonprofit organization that's all about exposure. So exposing our members to I guess ways to grow professionally, ways to grow their skill sets, uh, through technical advancements, potential field to jump into, and just other overall ways to uh, grow in development. So BDPA's motto is advancing careers from the classroom to the boardroom. One way that we are or more people are coming in. The way that we are, I guess, providing opportunities for exposure is with our monthly series. And I'll give John a moment to introduce our speaker. But first, I'll also talk about some of the other programs that we offer at BDPA. So another area of exposure is our STEM program, which this past Saturday we kicked off, and we'll be having our first session this upcoming Saturday, where we're still looking for volunteers to help out, and for students, it's definitely still in room for students to register, and I'll drop links to where to register for that. But essentially, our STEM program is where we're offering opportunities for students to get exposure to web development, to mobile app development, research space, data science, and cloud technologies. So I guess you could say, I guess the target group is high schoolers, but the offering rings are open for anyone, or I guess I would say students. All students are kind of open to learning, but high school and college students are the typical demographic. They have opportunities for scholarships and internships from there. But I would say in general, like the enrichment is good, like the exposure. Starting with the exposure early on and continuing on with it could help the students as they progress into their time, progress in throughout school, and then get into their careers. Could be a good jump start to be familiar with some of those, technologies and terminologies early on. So the STEM program, that's starting up pretty soon. If there's any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me in chat or online with LinkedIn or anything like that. We're also trying to grow grow our relationships with local colleges. So my alma mater is Georgia State, so I try to connect with them to keep them in the loop on how things are going. If we happen to have any Georgia State students that join and they're interested in probably getting something going, local chapter or local campus wise, maybe having like a local college group, that's something that we're still working on. But that's at least like trying to keep those ties and keeping the students, the college students in the loop is one of the areas as well. And then our monthly program that is brought to you by Matrix. So Matrix has been partnering with us for the last couple of years now, with keeping us with content for the last couple of years, and they're one of our big sponsors. So with that, I'll hand it over to John to introduce our speaker for the evening.
Awesome, thanks, Shanika. We've been partnering now for almost 3 years. And Matrix has been involved with BDPA for a lot longer than that. I think I remember meeting Mike at an in-person meeting way back, either because you were the chapter president, and then were you the national president of BDPA
as well? I was a local member. Yeah, I was a local member of the chapter, but I was also the national president for BDPA for 2 years, sat on the board for 4 years.
Yeah. So welcome back, welcome home. So grateful to have you with us tonight. I see a lot of names and faces that I haven't seen before. So I'll also add the work that Shanika and Victor Montgomery have done the last couple of years, in particular in the STEM group for kids, has been so impactful. There's 30 BDPA chapters across the country, for those of you that maybe this is your first meeting. So every year, one chapter is nominated and given the award of the chapter of the year. So the work that Shanika and Victor have done the last couple of years has been so good that the Atlanta BDPA group, this chapter, has won the chapter of the year 2 consecutive years in a row. So really some awesome stuff that's happening within the chapter, and just an awful lot of giving back into the community and investing in kids, investing in people that are hungry to get better and gain knowledge. So last year, our series, the theme of our user group meetings, monthly meetings, was on spotlighting the Atlanta market and just giving our great Atlanta companies a chance to just come out, and talk about their culture and why people like to work there, why they come there, why they stay. And that was great. It was a great series. This year, we our theme, Victor and Shanika and I huddled about this at the end of the year last year, and we decided our theme would be on leadership development. And again, a way just our user group, our members wanting to get better, and what better thing to really work on than leadership. And so tonight we have Mike Williams talking about leadership. We're really fortunate to have him. He's led technical teams, infrastructure, IT teams at all sorts of companies that are an impressive list. Currently, he's the director of engineering at Google, but he's led teams at UPS, at IBM, at Cigna, Career Builder over his career. So he could speak to anything with regard to leadership. But tonight's topic, I think, is awesome. It's do you really need a title to lead and to be a leader? And I think we all know the answer to that, but I'm really looking forward to the presentation tonight. And thank you again, Mike, for being with us.
Hey, thank you for that introduction. We're really talking about a topic that personally I care quite a bit about. And the reason being, if you don't know me, I wrote a book a while ago. The book is called The Advantage Factor. The last chapter of that book is called You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader, and it covers leadership. And I spend a lot of time talking to teams that in companies I work for. I spend a lot of time on panel discussions. I spend a lot of times, I've actually been at Georgia State and actually talked to the whole women's faculty there about leadership as well. I was invited there a few years back. So leadership is one of the things I care most about, because even in the technical field, like engineering, infrastructure, and all those things, we talk about the technical aspects of how to build and develop products, whether that's software, whether that's hardware. Very few of the engineers and technical teams get a lot of coaching or investment in them in terms of teaching them leadership skills. In fact, I was talking to someone on my team today who's a senior manager, and he expressed that one of the things that he believes he's missing in all the years he's been in his role is how to have a bigger thought leadership, look at vision, look at strategy, because he's always been on the engineering side. He's always been managed from an engineering perspective, but there was a lot of skill domains that he thought he was lacking. So this topic itself, if you look at a lot of teams, no matter which industry vertical, what background people have, and even entrepreneurs. In order to be a good entrepreneur, you have to have good leadership capabilities. So I spent a lot of time talking about this, and this passion started back in early 2000s when I worked for UPS. I was selected for this this opportunity. We call them special assignment. They provide for managers who they feel have high potential. As a young director then, and I was asked to teach at corporate schools. Back then, a lot of corporations had their own training departments, and you did a lot of training. So I actually trained directors and managers from across the globe. They flew into Atlanta. I lived at a hotel, the Hilton Hotel in Atlanta, Marietta, Georgia, as a matter of fact, for 11 months. And we taught over 11 months, we taught about 250 different managers and directors from around the world, leadership skills based on the various programs UPS put together. And since then, I've taught so many people. I've actually developed workshops, and some of the slides I go through are part of some of the slides I've developed for different workshops where I've taught the topic in addition to entrepreneurship, because I wrote a book on that as well. So with that said, I'll get started. And also, as I go through the presentation, I've cut the slides down quite a bit. You can ask questions at any time during the presentation. We don't have to wait till the end. I like to do the questions, but John, I don't know if you have a problem with that. We can keep the time up. I think we have like 30 minutes or so, and I can manage that as we go through. But I like to have the interaction between myself and the people on the call.
Yeah,
John,
I love that. Yeah, I think it's more impactful for everyone if they've got a question, just to be able to like get it out, while they're thinking about it and not have to hold it. So love that. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so let's get right into it. So leadership to me, when I talk about leadership, I always talk about what's called an assigned leader. And what that means is all of us have jobs, and we have people that we report to. We have a manager, we have a quote unquote boss, if you will. So those are what I call assigned leaders. Even myself, when I started at Google or started at any of the companies that John mentioned, I was assigned to a team, whether that team was a couple hundred people or a couple thousand people. I was assigned to a team. No one asked, hey, or went to anyone and said, we want Mike as the leader. You get hired, the team comes to work the next day, they have a new manager, right? So you'll immediately get some respect because of your role. But ultimately, over time, you have to demonstrate and earn that trust and earn that respect, because that temporary acceptance in terms of leadership only goes but so long. So it's how you act, how you manage people, how you interact with people, how much you invest in them and growing and developing their skill sets, how open you are to ideas that they have, how you effectively delegate, how do you stay away from micromanaging, because when you take on a role, a lot of the team members actually know their job. What they're looking for from you is to learn. They're looking for a vision. They're looking for you to be someone that supports them, and then also support, obviously, you're supporting the company. They're looking for someone to tie what the company is doing, the company objectives, to what they do every single day. And all that actually matters. So that leadership status has to be learned, it has to be earned over time. That's very important, because a lot of us take for granted, we get assigned these roles, we're a manager, whether it's a CEO, whether it's a SVP, VP, all those different titles. It never matters unless you take the time to earn it from your team. And I'll move on, but the one thing you must remember, I always say, you can fool whoever you report to. You can fool the peers that you work with. The one team that you can never fool is the people that report up to you. They always know what you do, what you contribute, and how you lead. You can go and tell everybody, hey, I did this, and the team's working and doing all these things. You can go and take credit. As a leader, we always get the credit for our team's performance, right? We all know that. You ever had a boss that you do a lot of things and you see them constantly getting all the accolades, but somehow they never forget, they never mention the people that have helped them or give their team an opportunity to shine, if you will. That's something your team will always know and recognize. So you should share in that. So that's how you earn that acceptance of leadership. Any questions there? So over the years, I thought about a lot of things I did, and I've managed teams anywhere from a couple hundred people to a global team of over 2,000 people. and at various times in my career. And what I realized is that there's a lot of things that were common. So what I came up with is this leadership performance framework. And for me, everything centers, whether you're a manager, whether you're an entrepreneur, everything we do, the customer always sit at the very center, right? If you look at some of the things that are going on today, one of the hard truths that I had to realize early on in my career is that no matter where you sit, if you're an employee, the highest you'll ever get to in terms of the pecking order, if you will, is number 3. Why do I say number 3? If you work for a public company, there's one critical piece or group of people that are critical to start a public company. That's the investors and shareholders. Then, in order to maintain a company, in order for a company to keep growing and for them to hire employees, they need customers, right? If I ask the question, name me a company without a customer, there isn't any. So the shareholders and the customers, you need customers because that's how you actually get hired and have a job. Without the shareholders, without the customers, there's no employment for you. So what I learned is that's always the pecking order. So the hard truth, when you think about it, think about all the layoffs that happen. You'll never see a company talk about they're going to lay off their customers, or they're going to fire their customers, or that they're going to fire their investors. It's not going to happen. Those aren't optional because that's how a company grows. Unfortunately, the hard truth is, no one will say it this way, but the hard truth is employees become optional, because if the company's not doing well, they'll reduce the number of people that are actually employed. You see it in the newspaper now in terms of all the different layoffs. So whatever you do, no matter what role you have to make sure you're focused on the customer. When you focus on the customer, the value you provide actually grows, the service you provide to the customer grows, and if a customer is happy, they'll continue to buy more services, and your company will actually grow. So you contribute to that. And a lot of times in tech, how we provide value is providing solutions, making sure our systems are highly available. If your systems aren't available, aren't reliable, you can lose customers. So therefore, you're impacting the customer's top line, and then also their bottom line in terms of profitability. So that's why I say everything centers on the customer. Then you have to step out and look at the culture of the team. One of the key aspects of any team is the culture. How you hire and your team makeup is critical in that. As a team member, forget about titles. You don't need to be a manager or anything else. How you show up to work and how you work with your team members matter, because it can affect the complete culture of a team. Then when you start looking at the team dynamics, some of the things that you look at is you want to be innovative. Those are ideas you bring to the table. You want to make sure you're not a distractor. A distractor is, no matter what goes on, they'll never find anything good to say. No matter what you do, no matter what the team's doing, you'll never find anything good to say, because most likely they have their own agenda. You also want to be an enabler. Enabler is someone that shows up to work, they do their job. They're not interested in being promoted, and I'll talk about these things later on because I break those things down. And then your team also has achievers and leaders, and I'll talk about, there's a slide where I break those things down. And then as an individual contributor or a supervisor or a manager, you also want to provide professional value. That's basically constantly growing with continuous learning. You want to provide some good performance in terms of your reviews, and you have to be committed to the objectives of the team, objectives of the business every single day. Whatever you do has to be aligned with the business objectives. It's not a matter of coming to work and doing things just because. You're coming to work because the manager, the CEO believes that you have value, which is why you were hired in the first place. And that's what their expectation is. So that brings us to enablement. And enablement is about you accelerating, whether it's a job, if you're in construction, how do you actually make the processes better in construction? How do you make it safer? If you're in the digital space, how do you provide more innovation? But ultimately, every single person is going to be measured based on the results they provide to the company and to the customers. Results are always the bottom line and always will be the measure at which we're all measured in terms of performance, in terms of contribution, in terms of value. Any questions on this? You guys are quiet now.
I'll ask something.
Yeah.
I've been at Matrix for many years, and oftentimes the what you're talking about, Mike, being customer centric, like that's like the main theme, and then like that's the banner, that's, you know, this is why we're here, being customer centric, and then everything is a drill down from that point. So it helps with like the vision and always having like a you know, whatever you want to call it, a North Star, just something that like, hey, we're hanging our head on this, and we can always go back to our purposes to be customer centric, and how this should guide us on, you know, how we act, how we, you know, go about our days. So that's a good, yeah.
And to that point, that's why I always ask the question, and I challenge people. I always say, name me one business that doesn't have a customer. There just isn't.
Yeah.
There just isn't, or you don't have a business at all. And that's why the customer has to be at the center of everything we do. And as an individual contributor or a person on the team, that's what you always have to think about. When you make a product, think about, because all of us on this call are customers, right? We understand what value is. We understand when we get value when we make a purchase. So we think about the things, and sometimes we'll walk away and say, well, I wish they would have did this. I wish they would have added this feature. Or when they sold me this product, I wish they did this. So you have to put yourself in the position of a customer, even though you're making a product or service. Put yourself in the position of a customer all the time and think like they did. Think about the things that could go wrong. Think about the things that you can actually do better. And when you do that, you always give yourself the best shot in terms of satisfying your customer. And that's the way I always think. It's like, if I'm a customer, if I put this product out, what would I think about it? So always put yourself in the position of the customer in everything you do.
Can I ask you about, you had talked about the distractor as one of the one of the people, like just never having anything good to say. And I know that's not like the topic tonight, like how to lead those people, but it's if there are leaders on the call, that would be valuable to hear. Like, what do you do with someone like that? How do you get them to turn around and like be on board with your vision and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, and I have a slide later on that I break those things down, right? And because it's important, because even forget about being a leader of a team, an individual contributor, you should understand the makeup of your team, because we've all interacted with someone that's a distractor. No matter what goes on, nothing good to say, right? Unfortunately, some of those distractors have a heavy influence on the team, because they can be influencers that have heavy influence on the team and what the team does. And if you don't address that quickly, you have a larger problem. And I'll talk about that later on. So it's important to understand the team dynamics as an individual contributor, as a supervisor, as a manager. Because all the things that apply to what we call assigned leaders, managers, and all that, it applies to you as an individual contributor. That's why I say you don't need a title to lead, because all those things you also need to think about as an individual contributor. And as you grow and look to become a leader, this prepares you for that when you actually take on that role. 4 skill domains. So it's interesting when I talk about earlier, I was talking to one of the guys on my team, and again, he's a great engineer, great manager, right? And but one of the things that always missing from a lot of engineers and a lot of technical people is, I would say, the process, the financial acumen or the business acumen. The things that they usually have is just the innovation, which is the engineering, the lifecycle management, the cloud stuff. And I gave some examples just based on the industry I'm in. But as an individual contributor, one of the things, and 4 of the things you should really care about, think about thought leadership from where you are. you don't have to have that title. Just think about thought leadership. What are your communication skills? Learn how to negotiate. What are some of the things you go through when you make decisions? There's opportunities where you can find a coach or you can find someone to mentor, but those are things you can also do while you're in that space as well. There's people that come to you where you have knowledge and skills, where they may want coaching, they may want mentoring. So you can do that from where you are. The other thing is from process. One of the things that even a lot of mature companies don't have, they don't have governance. When you start talking about OKRs, Google's very famous for OKRs, but also KPIs. The thing is also, how do you make the company more efficient? So again, looking at the customer perspective and looking at your company's objectives and how can you add value to that? So a lot of that is on the process side. You can automate things, or you can write better documents, no matter what career you have or what occupation you have, process is involved in that. So you can add value by contributing to that. If you're in a role where it's safety, there's a lot of things you can do to better safety by improving processes or streamlining processes. Those are things that you should think about. The other aspect of it is when you're at a lower level, some people don't get exposure to financial, like budgeting and things like that. You can work with your manager and try to get exposure to those things. There's things like variance analysis. I think for me, you leave that alone, but really get into budgeting. But the other thing that you can also immediately help is how you actually get and contribute to cost savings. There's a lot you can do today in your job where you can kind of reduce costs. Companies, no matter who they are, they love to save money. No matter who you are. If you're an entrepreneur, you should love to save money. So you look at what you're doing today and what your role is, and how can you contribute to a company's bottom line? You do that by cost saving. Some of those things is if you look at tech, is how do you improve the flow of what they call a backlog product from a backlog to production? If you look at, if you reduce safety exposure, you're reducing costs because there's no regulatory penalties and all those things. So no matter if you're in real estate, how do you reduce costs as it relates to if you're a property manager? What are the things you can do in terms of safety? What are the things you can do in terms of reducing the risk of the company with tenants? So there's a lot of things you can do no matter which space you're in, where you contribute to the cost savings of company. And then the innovation is those things I talked about, but most engineers are really used to. They want to build new shiny things. They can build a software. They can build hardware. In the cloud space, you can leverage things like AWS and Google and all those other things. So there's a lot of opportunity there. You can automate a process within CI/CD. So look at where you are and what you do, and think of all the things from your perspective in your role where you can provide thought leadership. And ask yourself, are you actually doing that, right? Ask yourself, are you thinking about process improvements all the time? Ask yourself, do you have opportunities from a cost savings or any financial aspect where you can contribute, or you can actually grow? There's a lot of different books you can read in terms of learning financial skills. When I was a supervisor, I didn't have the background, didn't have exposure to budgeting, but I wanted to learn. So there's this book called Financial Intelligence for I think it's for non-managers. I know I have the book around here somewhere, but I read it years ago. But there's a lot of books you can actually go read to kind of build up your skills in areas that you may be weak in or that you just need some growth in. But take the initiative to continue to invest in yourself in all those different ways, whether it's through a mentor, whether it's through reading, whether it's through a class. You have to constantly build these 4 skill domains. And all of those collectively are what I call the value creation. This is where you can create value for your company. And this is where you can lead where you are. Any questions there?
I had a question, but I saw John unmuted first. So
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
sure. So probably my question is maybe how do you maybe step outside of where you're currently at to think about some of these things? So like me being a probably more of an individual contributor on a team, and then also being a developer, maybe not necessarily thinking about financials and budgeting as much for the team. Like, if anything, the only thing around cost savings is like how could you potentially try to improve your delivery process to, have this maybe out there sooner, like maybe scrape off a couple weeks or something like that. But how to maybe step out to think about some of these other things like in process or financial.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is volunteer. So let's take example BDPA. BDPA has a conference budget every single year. You can volunteer to actually work on a conference. There's a volunteer program that you can participate in where you'll have exposure in terms of there's a budget, obviously at the conference there's a budget for speakers, there's a budget for the hotels and all the other things. So you can volunteer and find opportunities to volunteer on different things. There's project managers. You probably have project managers where you are. They have exposure to some budgets for different projects. You may not want to opt to sit with them and just shadow them and say, hey, let me take a look at what you do, because they manage cost, time, and people for the most part. So you may want to sit with them and have them kind of look at that, right? And learn from them. You also may want to talk to someone, you may know someone that works in your financial department, right? I don't know if you've interacted with them or your manager knows. And you may say, you know what? Hey, do you mind if I interview? Do you mind if I sit with you guys to understand better what you actually do? So there's a lot of opportunities that you can actually take on outside of your normal day-to-day. You may look at a financial person as your mentor because that's an area you want to grow in. So all those things are actually possible.
That was essentially my question too, like how to best do that, or maybe over all these years, like as people got involved with this, what was the best approach? Like, I want to just say, hey, you just have to ask, or just say that, hey, I want to grow within the company. I'm interested in, advancing with the company. So I want to broaden my knowledge of everything. Just as straightforward as that, or
yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, because I'll talk a little bit about my exposure and how I became to grow in so many different areas. So, and I go back to my UPS days. I talked about the corporate schools. Never did anything related to facilitating training, right? So there was a fear there, but I'm one of those people. I want to take on a hard task. Like when others step back, I step forward. Call me crazy, but that was always my thing. Then, I just got involved. I requested these assignments, and back then, didn't have a kid or any of those things. So I took on assignments in different cities, and some of those were M&A, and that was here in Atlanta too. When UPS moved here in 1991, there was a lot of projects in the Atlanta area. So I was traveling from Jersey to Atlanta. And one was the M&A. And I was on a due diligence team, but I had a supervisor or manager that managed me. Part of that team, I didn't know anything about M&A. I didn't know anything about anything at that time, to be honest with you. But someone saw in me that I had high potential, thought I was a great leader, or some of my peers thought I was a great leader. But quite frankly, I didn't think I was ready for a lot of things that they put me in. But obviously, they knew more about me and my potential than I saw myself, because a lot of us can be our most critical observant, right? And so in that M&A, we did due diligence. What I discovered is I didn't know anything about process. So there was a guy named Mark Morelli, who I reported to on that assignment. We both were out of Jersey. And I picked up process, or the notion about process, from him. So that's when I went and started learning ITIL, and I got ITIL certification, Lean Six Sigma, all those things, because I started to fall in love with process. And in that time, I also found out about budgeting and looking at the cost. When we were doing valuation, we were buying a company called Overnight, a less than truckload company. Then I found out we did valuation. We had like 30 different companies we were looking at, and then they were broken down into several, and then I think a final of 4. And then it was a decision to purchase Overnight, less than truckload. And that became, I think it was UPS Freight or Freight Forward was the company name. So working on that project and giving me all that exposure exposed me to budget and made me want to learn more about process, because I realized I didn't know anything about process, even when I thought I did. So all those things open up things where I recognize areas where I had growth opportunities. And then I just went on a string of learning, buying process books, going to taking ITIL classes, started ING, I was Six Sigma. So all those things, I started growing in those areas. So there's a lot of things you can actually do, but sometimes those opportunities get exposed to you even when you're not expecting.
And do you find like there's like a balance with these kind of things, like when people are trying to improve and they're doing these things, you want to promote that about yourself, but you don't want to come across as like that annoying, like braggadocious type of person too, with like you could turn off your teammates and maybe turn off your direct leader too, that like if you're too, there's probably like a good way to do that, and you must have found that like the right lane, how to present that, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because even at my current employer, a lot of times, because over the years I've always reported to the CIO, who reported to the CEO, and then I did, was like 10, 11 years straight, right? In different Fortune 500 companies. Google obviously is a $283 billion a year company, much larger than most. So even if you were a CIO or SVP at one of the smaller companies in Google, it's different. You get paid well, but it's different in terms of where you sit. And that's why you see, if I was at another company, I'd probably be a CIO or something else. At Google, a lot of those are, since they have such a large company, and they're multiple of, if you had a $50 billion company, Google's multiple of that, if you really look at it from the scale. So a lot of the things where I have people that I report up to don't have as broad of experience, haven't managed the number of people I've managed, haven't done a lot of things I've done, because Google, a lot of people get promoted up, they're engineers, very smart people, but a lot of them don't have process, a lot of them don't have the other skills, because they didn't have to have those things. That wasn't something that was demanded. So you do get in a place where you have to humble yourself because you're not in that role. But at the same time, opportunities present themselves, because even now, if you looked at the news where Google's saying they want to be more focused on value creation, internally, governance, and all the things. So now it's like, Mike, you have experience with that. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? But yeah, you don't have to go and brag about anything, just like anything else. You'll demonstrate everything in your work and your actions. That's all you do. And then you also have to be very careful that you don't come across that way. Some people, you ask questions, like I've asked some questions, and if people aren't used to process government, they get turned off because they're not interested in that. They just want to go build something. And that's not on you, it's on them, because that hasn't been what they've been exposed to. So I've experienced that, not just at Google, but other places as well, because that's just isn't what they've been exposed to. And a lot of times their previous manager has never had a focus on process, never had a focus. Where IBM, I had a team of people, none of them seen budgets. They were director level folks. They've never even saw the sort of budget. So those are things that a leader has to expose their team to. All right.
Gotcha.
See a
Thank you,
hand
Mike.
raised.
Yeah.
Cheryl?
Hi, I'm new to the group and to the meeting. I kind of joined at the last minute. I stumbled upon the link and signed up. But I have a finance background, and you'd mentioned trying to understand about financials. Another good place to understand the business is reviewing your 10K or your 10Q, or the annual report. It gives you a lot of information about, what the business plans to do, what they have done, and then you can also review some of the financial statements. It's kind of dry reading. You can but if you skim through it, you can look for the highlights and some of the major bullet points. And then in some cases, they've got great slides, such as Mike is presenting today. But I find that to be a great resource as well.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you brought that point up because outside of that, because if you don't understand financials, you may be intimidated by financial statements, right? But a good thing to Cheryl's point, the other alternative is listen to your earnings call. Listen to your company's earnings call every single quarter. I do that a lot for a lot of different companies. Some of us invest, we kind of listen to the calls, but I'm fascinated by it because you kind of get to understand and know where your company's going, what strategy, what they're telling Wall Street in terms of what they're going to be focused on. And it's always interesting in terms of it's revealing as well, because you don't have to necessarily read the financial statements. The company actually walks the analysts through that, through the financial statements and what the numbers are telling them. So I think that's actually a very good point. So you can, if you understand financial statements, income statements, cash flow, and balance sheets, oh, knock yourself out, right? From on a income statements on a quarterly basis, but you can also look up things on a yearly basis as well. But I would say listen to the earnings call. They usually have presentations and slides, and they have audio, and they do webcasts. So if you want to get a kick, log on to go to a financial page of your company, and they usually have a list of previous webcasts about earnings calls. So that'd be a good one too. Thanks, Cheryl. I think that was a very good point. Okay, so let's talk about this performance quality circle. So this was something I came up with because, again, over years, there's a couple of things that somehow I just see repeated. And when you start anything out, when I take over a team, I always say I'm at the distracting phase. And the reason I'm at distracting phase is because I walk in the door, I don't know anything. I don't know, I need to understand the scope of what I need, should be managing, because when you interview, they tell you one thing. You get inside, it's a whole different thing, right? Because they tell you all the nice things that are going on, and they'll tell you how great they are. Here's what we're doing. And you have this team. Sometimes you get it and find out the team's bigger than what they said it would be. The scope of work is a lot larger. And then all the great things that they said that it would be are just total opposite. Things are all over the place. So now you get in, you have to understand what the what is. So the what is the distracting thing, because you don't know much. But in order to manage anything, you have to understand what you're managing first and foremost. So you have to understand what the what is. And then, so that's why I call it distracting, because all you're doing is trying to find out and understand things. Then once you understand what the what is, the scope of work, and all those things that you're responsible for managing, and I'm looking at this as a leader perspective, because if you understand the things that a leader does, it helps you as a single contributor or a supervisor, because again, you think like a leader, understand from their perspective, it puts you in a better place to lead without the title as well. And then the next thing is about the who. Okay, once I understand the what, who's all managing the what? Who's managing the servers? Who's managing the storage? Who's managing safety? Who's managing risk? All those things is whose responsibility to manage all the what you need to understand. Then it's like the how. So how are they managing? What kind of governance is in place? What process is in place? What documentation is in place? I found that a lot of these jobs I've taken, they don't have a lot of those things in place. And if they are, they're very weak at best. So you walk through that. So I always do a 90-day observation. And then I go to optimize. So after the 90 days, I understand the what, I understand the who in terms of the people, the team, and the dynamics, where we're lacking in skills, and then the how in terms of where we're lacking in processes. And then I move to optimizing, because now at optimizing, I understand all those things. Now I'm putting, after 90 days, I'm putting the strategy together to say, here's the things that we need to do. This is our roadmap to get better. And here's the people, the organization, how we need to be organized as a team. Here's who's going to be accountable for different aspects of the what. And then you present that to the team. And then you outline key measurements as to how you're going to define success. It's a lot more detailed than that, but that's at a high level what I always do. Every role I've taken, it's been the same process. When you understand this, no matter where you sit, you have a responsibility. You have a what, whether you're programming an application, you have a what, you have a who. Even if you're a single contributor, you're the who, you're the person who's responsible. And then the how, you have to do documentation. There's maybe some processes you have. And then the more you understand all those things, the better you can get at your job. And then again, lead from where you are. Any questions on that? Because for me, this is really key. And this is how I approach everything. No hands. The other thing is about maintaining good relationships. I think this is overlooked quite a bit. Is that when you're part of a team, in order for you to contribute to a team, you should have good relationships with your team members. A lot of times we've all worked for what I deem quote unquote bad bosses or managers. Usually they were disconnected to the team, they micromanaged to death, and everything was autocratic. It's just do as I say. Weren't very collaborative, weren't open. That's not building good relationships with your team. When I work with teams, even though they report up to me, when we talk, and I always say this about vendors. Vendors come in, they always try to sell us something. So vendors, the way they work, and if you're a good salesperson, you're always trying to figure out who's at the top so that you can actually leapfrog over the supervisor, the managers, and go to the leader and then try to get them to buy in, right? When I've worked, one of the things I was always proud of, when a vendor came and met with us, because I always tell them to convince the team members first before they talk to me, because the team member is going to recommend to me a solution. When they talked to us, they never knew who was the manager when they walked in. Never sat at the head of the table, just sat around. I let the team members spoke. They never knew who was the manager. So they never knew who to direct their comments to, because that's where you build confidence in the relationships amongst your team, because you make sure they understand it's not about you, it's about this team. You don't have to be the one always speaking. You don't have to be the one that walks in the conference room and sit at the head of the table. Sitting at the head of the table doesn't make you a leader. You just sit at the head of the table. You lead no matter where you sit or no matter where you stand. No matter what room you walk in, it doesn't matter. So sitting at the head of the table doesn't do that, whereas, contrary to a lot of beliefs. But building those good relationships, little things like that go a long way in terms of building relationships, because your team knows you can lead, but you can also follow. When your team sees that, again, you start earning that respect, you start earning that leadership title, if you will. But if you're a team member, it's the same thing. You walk into work every day, no matter if you're more experienced or not, you're part of the team. To the point that John mentioned earlier, you don't have to walk around and pat yourself on the back and make sure everybody knows that you're smarter than everyone on the team. You don't have to walk around and make sure everyone knows that you got the biggest project and you have the most exposure to upper management. Building relationships is all about you being part of the team and not putting yourself above the team, not putting yourself above the objectives of the team. And that's really key. And then also building those relationships outside. As a single contributor, you want to build relationships outside your team, because ultimately, when it comes to getting promoted, sometimes the feedback is from people outside your team, who you worked with on other teams. So you want to build those sponsors, you want to build that up. So you want to build those good relationships in different departments, not just your own, not just amongst your team members. So that's very important. And then also having those different relationships expose you to different things. So Shanika, it makes it easier to kind of go to someone in finance, or it makes it easier to go to another person in a different department to help you when you build those relationships. You guys, we've all been there. They want to call you up that you haven't talked to in forever, and then they have a request for you to do something for them, but you haven't talked to them in forever, so they haven't built a relationship. They just call you up, and based on where you work or what you do, they have a request. How does that make you feel? Doesn't feel good, right? It's like, okay, who's this person? Never talked to them, don't have a relationship with them. But let someone that you've known and you built a relationship with, like my friend Chris Delic, he's not on the call, but I thought I saw him earlier. But Chris calls, I'm going to take the call, going to listen, because we built a relationship over decades. And those are the things you value. So as a team member, you want to make sure you build a relationship, not just with your team members, but also people outside of your department and function as well. Relationship building is very, very important.
Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I recently completed a contract, and I was actually leading a business unit. And the team that I work with, I made some changes. I was driving the energy, and they scored fours on their survey, which they had never scored before. On a scale of 1 to 5, 4 being, 5 being the highest. And I guess my question is, how do you have balance in working with your directors, people above you? Because at some point I got pushback from one of the directors, and he just wasn't very supportive and was kind of gruff. And I know that I'm making an impact and making a contribution, but I'm just not getting the support. So how do you handle a situation like that?
Yeah, I think I need some clarity too. So you said you got a 4. You perform well, you and the team produce results. But from your manager, you don't think that he was recognizing the progress or the performance of the team? Is that pretty much the summary?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. The manager I was working with, she was out on medical leave, so he stepped in. So this is a different manager. But he just was really kind of aggressive in working with me and how he talked to me, even though I was sharing information with him. So how do you handle a situation like that where you're supporting this person, you're making a contribution, but you're a contractor, you've been there less than a year, and he's been there 18 years. So there's some competition there.
Yeah, it's not only that. I mean, we just also have some bad managers. A lot of people, unfortunately, this is what I mean, the assigned aspect of a leader. Some people just get leadership positions. Doesn't mean that they're good leaders or good managers. We've all experienced that, right? And then also, if he looked at you as competition, forget about it. And I'll talk about that actually on the next slide. That's hard too, because they see you as competition. There's always going to be something where no matter what you do, it's never going to be good in their eyes because they see you as competition. So what you need to constantly do is focus on the work you're doing, focus on the team, document those things, because what you always find too is those type of managers don't exist or stay around long. But also you may be in a situation where what you're doing now is applicable to anything you do beyond that. If you go get another job or whatever, because most people leave companies because of a bad boss. I mean, that's always one of the reasons. So you just have to keep focused on what you're actually doing, because if that person's in that position, quite often it's hard to change that. But you got to try to build some kind of rapport, but also ask him and understand from him or her, what is it that you can do better? Where are you guys falling short in your communication? To have a candid conversation. Just tell him that you feel that you're not getting what you need from him, or that you don't think he's hearing you. And be prepared and lay out those things or circumstances where you felt that way, and see what the response is. And then from there, you'll have to decide what your actions will be. A lot of times, they may not even recognize that they're doing anything until you bring it to their attention. But if you got a bad boss, we've all experienced it. You got a bad boss that have been there for a while, and most people kind of let it go because the person's been there for a while. That's usually very difficult. And what in my experience is, when that doesn't change, people just leave.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I think I did also like the point that you mentioned, Mike, as well, about like actually voicing I guess those like concerns or giving that constructive feedback. But I think finding a way to give that constructive feedback in a way that doesn't seem like nitpicking, like it's definitely how you feel, but you're trying to find a way that doesn't come across as harsh. Especially if I guess you're still building up that rapport with this leader. So I think that's a skill to build as well.
Absolutely. No, I think that's important, because that's why I said take notes and be clear on what you have challenges with. So a lot of times we're quick to jump and talk about things, but sometimes we go and think about it. And to what you're alluding to, Shanika, sometimes we can jump the gun on a lot of different things. We'll read things the wrong way. So that's why it's good to have the conversations, because lay out specifically what your problem was, or the situation or some activity or action that occurred where you had the problem. And maybe they have a different perspective in terms of why they said something, why they did something. And you want to understand from their perspective too. Don't immediately go in and just, they'll get and assume they're guilty of this or that. Sometimes they don't even recognize what they're doing. So be very focused on laying out the different points you feel that you want to understand. Go in there with the focus on understanding. If you go in there with the focus on understanding, you can hear them more, get their perspective, and it may improve the relationship. But if a person is just a terrible manager, it won't matter. But just be a professional and make sure you hear them, and go in with the idea you want to understand, not so much of being combative or just having an attitude, but go in just with some open-ended questions about your feelings. And then, I say open-ended because you want them to be able to explain. So I talk about this early on. I talk about this in a circle, and this is important. No matter where you sit, this is something you need to understand. Every team makeup, in my experience, consists of what I call the ideal team makeup, right? So every team, if you look at in the digital space, you have innovators. In other spaces, I call them influencers. Influencers are people who aren't in any leadership role, but they have a lot of influence on the team, right? So you think about the teams you're on, there's always that one person that everyone listens to. They're like E.F. Hutton. If you remember the old commercial, or some of you guys may have been around that long, right? Big John and I probably the only ones, but there used to be this old commercial called E.F. Hutton when they talk, people listen. So some of the influencers are like that. They don't have any title, no leadership role, but when they talk, people listen. Those influencers can be good or bad, right? But if they're what I call distractors and they have to be an influencer, then you have a terrible situation as a leader amongst your team. You have a terrible situation as a team member as well. So I put innovators because I was talking to most people that were in the digital space, but also you can use the I for influencers as well. But it's more positive when you look at innovators, because innovators are people that are thought leaders. They come up with things, they're disruptors. They always challenge the status quo. But you can also use that I for influencers, who are also people who are thought leaders and all those positive things, but they can also be on the negative side. So you have to be very careful. Because if that influencer or innovator is a distractor, meaning that no matter what the team is doing, no matter what you want to do as a team member, no matter what idea you bring up, they're always negative. There's nothing, unless they've done it themselves or unless it's their idea, it's always going to be negative. Those people can destroy your team. You'll never get anything done, because as a team member, you're constantly running into that roadblock. As a manager, you're constantly running into trying to manage this distractor on a regular basis. So you can't even manage your team because you're trying to manage that individual person who's being a distraction to the team. So John, to your point earlier and how you manage that, in my experience, you have to manage that quickly. When I take over teams, I do my observation. I put everybody in this bucket and don't write it down, but mentally you have, obviously, if I have a team of 2,000 people, that's not a team I'm interacting with on a daily basis. It's usually my direct reports and maybe one level down. But I have to figure out who are the influencers and innovators. I have to figure out who are the distractors. If an influencer or an innovator is also distracted at the same time, I have to address that quickly. Otherwise, I'll have a hard time coming in and transforming the team, because now there's people on that team that look up to this person, people on that team that listen to that person. I have to get them on board. So what I usually do is sit them down. And if there's something I recognize where they're not on board, they're being negative, I sit them down and have a candid conversation. I ask them what challenges are they having, whether with me or the direction the team's going. I ask them, and then I tell them I need them on board. and how can I support them? What do they need from me? How can I be a better manager for them? But I tell them, I need you on board, and I need you on board quickly. And a lot of times they turn and you work with them because they realize once you open up, they realize you're not coming in trying to be autocratic. You're coming in to work with them. When you sit and talk to them, you're not trying to be their boss. It's like, look, I'll take ideas from you if it works. It's not about my idea versus your idea. It's the best idea for the team. So when you start opening up to that, I've actually had people that were distractors that end up being leaders in the group because I put them in roles where, hey, you know what? Won't you lead that effort? And then they had to actually say, well, I'm leading this effort. So they had to start working with team members, even ones that they didn't like. They had to start working with team members. They had to start measuring. And then I exposed them to different things that their previous manager didn't. So they love that. Some of those people are actually working at companies like HP and others today. But you have to figure out who those distractors are quickly. And then enablers are people are really what I call the most important team members, because most people who aren't managers usually sit in the enabling piece. That may be you, that may be some other members. Enablers are people that show up to work every day. They do their job. They're good at their job. And some of them aren't even interested in getting promoted. They're not high achievers, don't care to be high achievers. Some of them just want to come to work every day, do their job, and go home. I used to have this person at UPS called her name was Agnes Yenga. Agnes Yenga knew everything. This is when I was in mainframe system programming. Agnes knew everything. She'll sit down and teach you whatever you wanted to know. Agnes, there was no competition. She didn't want to be a high achiever. She was married, she had kids, she did her job, and she went home. That was it. She wasn't interested in office politics. She wasn't interested in anything other than doing her job. Agnes got more work done in a half a day than most of us got done in a full day. If you were an achiever and you wanted to learn something, the person you go to is your enabler. And the reason you go to that person is because they're not competition. They're not looking at you as competition. So they're going to share everything they know with you. Being an achiever, coming into a new group, and then going to another high achiever, most likely they're going to kind of like push you off because they look at you as competition. They're not going to tell you everything because you and them are both you and them are trying to get to the same thing or trying to take a step up on that leadership ladder. So I always tell people, if you're a high achiever and you want to learn something, you go to a new group, go to one of those enablers because they don't look upon you as competition. They're going to tell you everything you need to know. And then they're going to just go at it. But those are all the variables and different consistent things you'll see, characteristics you'll see as enablers. They're consistent. Some of them are usually average performers, but some of them, like Agnes, are top performers. They just don't care about getting promoted, or they have no ambitions to be in a leadership role. And they welcome comfort. They're just comfortable with where they are. They're not interested in anything else. And then achievers, as I talked about, they're reliable. They're people that aspire to do more and be more. And they're highly motivated. Whether it's motivated by just their work, motivated by getting promoted to the next level, they have a lot of motivations. And then lastly, you have people that you consider leaders. This is where this whole thing, you don't need a title to be a leader comes in. A lot of leaders, if you guys think about your teams where you sit today, you can think of at least one person that people look upon as a leader in the group that doesn't have the title. You can think of a person that they should actually be our manager, even if you don't say it, right? Every team has that. And that's the person that every time something goes on, you tell them, hey, why don't you go talk to, if I'm the director, someone's telling this person, why don't you go talk to Mike? Because they look at this person as a leader within the group. And usually that kind of gets born out of the person's actions. It gets born out of how that person communicates, collaborates with others. So they get a leadership status just based on who they are and what they actually do. That's what I clearly mean when I say you don't need a title to be a leader, because there's always a leader amongst us that has no title whatsoever. There's a person that can walk in a room that's looked upon as a leader, has no title. It's just their aura, how they walk in the room. It's how they present themselves. And those things are very important. And I have a lot of people on my team that sometimes I'm talking to them, I take a step back because their knowledge, their skill in terms of how they present things, how they see things. Those make you better as a leader when you have leaders amongst your team members. And you have to be open to that, and you have to give them room to grow, meaning give them assignments where they can lead. Give them meetings where they can lead, where sometimes you just have to sit back and be quiet and let them lead. That takes a lot of courage, and also that takes confidence in your own leadership abilities to allow that. A lot of leaders don't have that confidence because they feel threatened that if I let this person do that and someone sees that, they may feel I can't do my job. They may feel that, well, this person should lead. But that's your job as a leader, is to grow other leaders. If you're not doing that, then you're not doing your job. Any questions on here? Because this is very important. And you need to understand this no matter where you sit, because you can think of, just by a show of hands, where you sit today, can you think of people that sits in any one of these things? Just put the raise a hand. You can think, can you think of any person on your team that will sit in any one of these domains? Yeah, we all can. But it's important to understand the makeup, because as a team member, you need to know who your enablers are, the people you can work with to grow. You need to know who the high achievers are, because if you aspire to be a high achiever, then you want to look at the people that are achieving things within your group, right? And then as a leader, if you want to become a leader, look at the characteristics of the person that's perceived to be a leader. So you have all these different characteristics within your group that you can use to kind of grow your own skill set to become the leader that you want to be. And that's where you can lead where you are. Because a lot of those leaders that fall into that last column, they're leading where they are. And those are the people that usually get promoted, because they get assignments just like I got when I went to corporate schools. A lot of people looked at me as a leader. Quite frankly, I didn't think I was ready for a lot of things. But that's how they saw me, because I was always the one that spoke up. I was always the one that stepped forward. But I was just doing my job and trying to get better at what I was actually really good at, what I thought I was good at. So I was really focused on getting better. But also I failed because I was so focused on getting better. I talk about this in my book. I was so focused on getting better and focusing on my next role. I was the lead operator at the time before I became a supervisor. And all those people looked at me as a leader. There was an opportunity to get my dream job. And I didn't get it because my boss said, hey, Mike, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for you. You'll be good at it, but just not right now. What I heard was just no. I thought I earned it, and they just said no. But when I went home, I thought about it. He said, it's a great opportunity. You'll be perfect for it, but not right now. What I realized, they said not right now because I didn't train anyone else behind me to be as good as I was. I was so focused on being the best, I forgot that I was the lead operator who should have been training the other folks. So what he was really saying was, from a business perspective, we didn't have anybody that was as good as me, so I couldn't move on to the next level until we had someone, because it would hurt the business. I didn't realize that when he first told me, but when I sat and thought about it. So I went to work that Monday, I was training people like crazy because I realized I failed myself. I was training, it was like military. I changed all the automated order, we set up like we call PF keys at the time. I changed all those things. So I learned the hard way that no matter where you sit, make sure you train up other people, because you can rob yourself out of an opportunity to take a step up just because you haven't prepared others on your team. So always think about that. Even when you're in an individual contributor role, if you're doing something today that you're very good at and people rely on you and you have aspirations to move on and do something else, make sure you train someone else to do what you're doing. Because otherwise you can be in that another year or 2 years because you haven't trained anyone. I learned that the hard way. So everywhere I go now, I train managers, I train people to be leaders. I show them everything because it builds up a stronger team. When I'm out, no one has to say, well, wait till Mike comes. If I got a team that's saying that, then I'm not doing the right thing. I can always point people to different people on the team and say, hey, they're handling that. You can go talk to them. So that's very important. No matter where you sit, make sure you train someone to do your job. Because if you have aspirations to move on and do other things, That's the most important thing you can do to help yourself with your career progression. Because if you don't have no one there, you may have to do like I did, sit an extra year and be very disappointed, all because I failed. It wasn't my manager. He did his job. I failed myself and I failed the team. And I learned that hard lesson a long time ago. Any questions there? So ultimately, in the end, you take the whole ideal and you switch the letters around a little bit. It's all about you taking accountability and say, I lead. You have to inspire, you have to lead with a purpose. You have to enable personal team growth. When I talk about taking on assignments, looking at mentors and coaching and reading, that's you taking on your personal and team growth. Assuming accountability and responsibility as a leader, that's a large part of it. Accountability is a big part of being a leader. Again, no matter where you sit. And dare to be constructively dissatisfied. I took this from CEO at Mike Eskew at UPS. He used to always say, be constructively dissatisfied. That means constantly looking at ways where you can improve yourself, your team, your company, the contributions and values that you have, add to the company, and also to your customers. I took this and I've been talking about this ever since then. I picked this up in the early 90s. It's something I've carried on. I'm constantly constructively dissatisfied. I always want to be better. I always want to do better. People talk about New Year's resolution. I always say the same thing. I'm just always interested in doing better and being better every year. That's always my goal. It's not about New Year's resolution. It's like, how can I be better and do better? Those are the things that you should take on when you start talking about leading from where you are. You never, ever, ever need a title to be a leader whatsoever. You can lead where you are. You can look at those things you can help people with, help your customers with, and help your business. The more value you add, the more people look at you from a leadership perspective. Any questions there?
Hey, so I don't necessarily have a question, but I just wanted to say that from my own personal experience, I've currently been at my job for about 6 years now. And what I've learned is when you train other people, that gives you the opportunity to move forward, like in your career. For example, I started off as a contractor on the help desk. I knew that's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be like a technical business analyst, you know? So as I learned, I was, training other people. And then when the opportunity presented itself, even though I was still, a contractor, then I became a full employee. I was able to venture off to like other departments just to see how, project management and things of that nature. I was able to venture off because I had the opportunity to train people behind me. So I really think it's a good opportunity to train people so you can move forward.
Yeah, I love that point. And I can't emphasize that enough in terms of my agreement with you. And again, I learned a lesson the hard way. I learned it the hard way. So that's an absolute fact. It helps you, as the saying goes, you help yourself by helping other people. That's a prime example of you helping yourself by helping other people. And I think that's key. So thank you for that. Any other comments, questions?
I'd echo that same sentiment, Mike. I once heard a senior leader talk about your job as a leader is to develop other people as leaders, and that's your measurement. You're going to be measured by how many leaders come out of your group is how you're going to be judged, really. And I mean, what a it's difficult, right? But it can be done. We're talking about it right now, and it just leads to such a better culture where you have less of the feeling of competition. It's more of a, hey, I have an opportunity. Like I'm in a group that wants me to, excel and get promoted. It's culturally, it's just so important to have that be known across the enterprise, and have it's a wonderful thing when someone way up can make a statement like that, where it's just like, we want our leaders to grow other leaders, and that just, permeates a lot of walls, I think. So yeah, great point, great discussion on that.
Yeah. Anyone else? And one of the things I'll add, and it's truly optional as well. I think it's like $6 or something, because it's not a push. But if you're interested in getting more information on a lot of things I covered here, there's a book I wrote called The Advantage Factor. It talks about some of the things, many of the things I actually covered here. And it talks about the challenge I had with not getting that promotion opportunity. I talk about areas where I failed. I talk about mentors that I had, Ed Z and Anthony Falenga, who kind of coached me through a whole lot in terms of helping my growth. It's funny, as a Black man, I had a short Italian guy and a tall Polish guy who was my primary mentors in my professional career, that had a huge impact on me. And I talk about them in the book as well. But I talk about all those things because the book starts with mentorship and ends with leadership. So the book ends because as a mentor, you always start as a mentor, a mentee, and then you want to grow into a leader, and then you become a mentor of someone else as well. But I talk about everything that I mentioned here is really what I cover in the book, because these are the things that I learned over the years. But I also talk about my failures, where I had opportunities to grow. When I was young and ambitious, thought I knew everything, and my mentors let me know that I didn't know everything at 18, 19. Because a lot of people like to write things and talk about how great they are. I like to write things and give you a perspective of the progression of my career, some of the challenges, some of the things that I share with you about. I failed myself in the opportunity. I talk about things when I had to consider leaving my employment after 18 years with UPS. There was a lot that went into that decision, because you create this career, you know everybody, you did well. Now you're just like, okay, I got to make this decision to go to another company. And there's a lot of fear in that, because everyone knows you where you are. You're comfortable, you develop a reputation. Now it's a question of, can I go do that elsewhere? So all those feelings kind of go through your head. So I kind of cover a lot of that stuff as well. And most people that read the book always say, you know what, you talk about the things I'm going through now, talk about some of the things that I went through early in my career. When I'm transitioning to a new job, this is right on time. So it's out there again, if you're interested, but it talks about just about everything that I covered here. So seeing no questions, John, I want to turn it back over to you. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you all for taking the time out to listen in. Appreciate the comments and questions. And then also, some of you guys I'm connected to on Facebook and some other avenues. If you have questions or even want to have a discussion, I always feel that learning is always bi-directional. I have mentees that I learn from all the time. And then even just talking to people, I like to talk to people because I'm constantly learning as well. So if you want to reach out and we can have a discussion as well.
Thank you, Mike. What a great session. So many very valuable points, very, very pertinent discussion threads. So thank you so much for being with us and sharing some of your personal stories too about it. It's always great to hear, how did you do it? We look at you and, the companies you've been at, the positions you've been at. It's great to be able to learn from people like you. So thanks so much for being with us. So hey, one of your friends, just a quick little plug for next month. If you wanted to join again, you could heckle one of your friends. He's going to be on. Derek Brown is going to be our speaker next month. Just putting this out there for the other folks on. Great speaker. Mike knows Derek really well. We had some panels before, but he's going to speak again, a leadership themed topic, but it's going to be on how to drive innovation and creativity within the team. So should be a really good session. So that's next month. But again, Mike, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, thanks everyone for joining.
Yep. Yep. Thanks again. I dropped links to our social media and on also to Mike if you wanted to connect with him on LinkedIn. And again, for BDPA, if you all wanted to volunteer with the conference or with our STEM program, feel free to reach out to me or to any of the BDPA channels. But thanks again, John, and thanks again, Mike.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Have a good evening, everyone.